We got some Installation00 for you today. Would the Precursors return, ruin Halo's mystery, lore, and theory? Now, as somebody that subscribes to a number of different Precursor theories, such as the Guardians in Halo 5, their Precursor in design rather than Forerunner, certain aspects like that, and someone that thinks that, honestly, the Precursors devolving into the Flood is to present the Forerunner and current humanity and all other races with a challenge to assume the proper mantle, or the mantle properly, I should say, and that there will be a Precursor return as a final test, is how I personally look at that. But I'm very curious what Installation00's thoughts on the matter are, as I always love watching Installation00's content. If you haven't watched his content, well, you're really missing out. You should definitely go check him out.
Season 5, Reckoning, has launched for Halo Infinite, and it's fantastic. We have a couple of new maps. We have cross-core helmet selection for customization, which hopefully paves the way to full cross-core armor selection in the near future, alongside a variety of new armor components, a couple new game types, as well as the addition of AI into Forge maps, and finally, effectively Firefight has dropped with Halo Infinite.
Yeah.
It's a really tasty lineup of new content for the game.
I'm still not super sold on Season 5. Like, I've had fun so far in Season 5. I have noticed that after the initial launch, some of the netcode issues are popping up a little bit. A game does feel fun to play, absolutely feels a lot better than it did at launch. The way it currently feels, in my opinion, is how the game should have been at launch, but I will agree with Installation00's stance on this is the best Halo's been in about a decade, which is interesting to consider that this is the best Halo has been in a decade, but it is the best Halo has been in a decade. And 343 has a lot of restructuring going on, a lot of management have left, which people are saying is a good thing. I really don't have enough understanding on it to really comment on that. The game does feel a lot better though, and I want this game to be good. I want this game to be better. I think that some of the hype is a little misplaced, as we're getting people that are citing just very strange numbers and unconfirmable numbers on, oh, look, Halo's back, baby. Destiny 2, for instance, especially after all the recent events, is currently sitting at still about 29,000 players concurrently on Steam alone, where Halo Infinite is sitting around the 10,000 mark. So it's getting better. It's not quite there yet. And if there's people that don't want to pick up Infinite again, I also can't judge them, because the game did hurt a lot of people, and it did burn a lot of people, especially because a lot of people are looking forward to co-op campaign, and they unfortunately didn't deliver split screen like they said they would, and that is a huge betrayal of trust for a lot of people. So you can absolutely still love Halo and not love Infinite, but that's just kind of my 2 cents on that. So far, it's a good season. If you're playing Infinite still, Season 5 is going to be a good season for you as far as everything I'm aware and have played recently. Netcode's still not my thing, but it's someone else's thing, so I will respect that.
And you can enjoy that right now by simply logging on to the Halo Infinite multiplayer. This particular update has been heralded by many as being the first major additive update to the Halo Infinite platform.
I would agree with that,
and
yes.
has definitely seen a notable uptick in the popularity and number of players playing Halo Infinite. So that's all going in the right direction for Halo. But of course, I'm leaving one major detail out here, and that's the re-emergence of the Flood. Now, I'm in 2 minds as to exactly what we're looking at here and how it bodes for the future of Halo's narrative. I'm kind of with it, I'm kind of against it. But let's reason that out together in today.
So, in regard to the Flood, we did have confirmation with Halo Wars 2 that in Awakening the Nightmares, the Flood are still around. They're still on high charity. They're still doing things. So this is technically actually the first real acknowledgement of the Flood, at least in video games, right? That we've really seen. So I'm very, very curious if this is going to be a foreshadowing of things to come, or if this is just a, hey, look, we have Flood Spartans. Because Flood Spartans, Oni had very specific, and I think the UNSC as well, had very specific directives on if a Spartan was ever infected by the Flood, that planet just no longer exists. Like, everything is authorized to delete that planet.
Is lore and theory. Cue the intro.
That's what we were missing, was the intro. The Precursors were before the Forerunners. They were a hyper-intelligent race that was able to use neurophysics before the Forerunners. So the
Hey everyone,
Forerunners
welcome back to Installation00, and I am more or less fresh back from HCS, the Halo Championship World Series 2023 held
I saw him tweeting about this. I'm super happy he went and super happy he had a good time.
at Seattle in the Arch Convention Center. It was an absolute whirlwind of a time. And as I explained to many people that I met there over the weekend, I come from a sleepy little seaside town where basically nobody knows who I am and what I do on the day-to-day. Going from basically living in a life of anonymity to basically walking through the threshold of the Arch Convention Center and immediately being recognized, and then spending the entire weekend with people who are absolutely fanatical and passionate about the Halo universe just as I am, was a real eye-opener.
Yeah.
And the holiday blues that have followed have kicked me in the arse quite solidly. But nevertheless, this doesn't change new information that's being released as new updates are being released for Halo Infinite, and this needs to be covered, mainly because it ties in with a few narrative things happening externally to the actual game narrative.
I have had my critiques on this in regards to, it's kind of like the Marvel MCU, right? Where you'll have certain things in certain TV shows, certain things in certain comics, certain things in certain books even. But, you know, so you can get to an Avengers movie and be like, what are these plot lines? Mostly that was actually, I can cite more of that in the Star Wars sequel trilogy specifically. As somebody that, I don't know, I can watch them. They were okay, right? You know, we had things like the Knights of Ren that were shown because Kylo took the place of the old, you know, head guy of the Knight of Ren, right? That was shown in a comic book, and Force Dyads, I believe, were mentioned in a book. And you had so many other things that were spread across so many other pieces of media that for a lot of people it was kind of hard to get caught up with. Like, people went into 9 being like, what's a, like me, like what's a Force Dyad? Wait, when did this come up in the last 2 movies? It didn't. It came in an external piece of media. Halo likes to do this. They'll put things in external books. They'll put things in external comics. Like the Didact from 4, after he got the grenade to the chest, is still alive. He is still alive. Technically, after 4, he was still alive. He went to one of the Halo rings, and Blue Team had to go and fight him again. And the Didact ended up getting composed, which, from my understanding from some of Installation00's former videos, technically he shouldn't have been able to be composed, but he was able to be composed. So the Didact still technically is alive from 4, even though it kind of painted him as dead, right? It's stuff like that. So I've had my critiques. You know, I still love Halo. I'm not going to say I don't love Halo. And, you know, I will always encourage somebody, if they want to play Halo, yeah, pick up Reach, pick up 3, pick up whatever Halo game you think looks interesting. This has been a very big criticism. Like, for example, as well, after Halo 5 Guardians, when Halsey says, took you long enough, we totally missed in-game Chief and Arby having a conversation. It was in a book. And just like, yeah, we totally just got to miss that.
I'm going to ask you to cast your minds back to the release of Halo Point of Light. This was a novel that was based majoritively on Zeta Halo, following Ryan Forge and 343 Guilty Spark, now within a Forerunner Armiger platform. This novel continued the voyages...
See, that's the Guilty Spark still around? I actually had no idea this was a thing. I mean, to be fair, like, I hardly leave the house anymore because I do a lot of content, and I'm trying to keep my uploads going as best as I can, right? I haven't read anything in a hot minute. Like, I actually didn't know Guilty Spark was still around.
Of Ryan Forge and the crew of the Ace of Spades. But it also expanded narratively, quite interestingly, aspects of the Forerunner's legacy. In some of the closing pages of the novel, Ryan Forge meets an imprint of the Librarian, whom divulges information to her surrounding the Librarian's own genetic history and how it relates, at least loosely, with that of humanity's.
So if the Librarian's still around, has she actually, like, gone into detail about the plot point from Halo 4 about speeding up Chief's evolution? Or is that still kind of a plot point that happened, but we either forgot about or we just aren't talking about? Because I actually thought that was going to play a huge part in Halo 5 and Halo 6. And there were a lot of people like Hidden Xperia that had entire fan theories on Chief evolving in a Halo 6, Halo 7 ending of Halo setting. So, like, I guess I'm curious now, actually. Like, I wonder if that plot point gets addressed, because I actually didn't think the librarian was still around. Like, I mean, yeah, it would make sense because she was in the shield world. Now the shield world's open. She realistically could go to any of the installations. That makes sense. Huh. And this is actually why I'm a little upset we're never going to get Halo story campaign for Infinite. And that the plans that we did have got canceled. Because I would have loved to play this in-game.
And goes on to explain how all things in the galaxy are cyclical, that life grows, flourishes, develops, falls away, and then is rebirthed once more. That at some point or another there will be another librarian, there will be another Ryan Forge. And all the while she is discussing this with Ryan, she is tending to a species of plant or flower that she has reintroduced to the soils of Bastion, which is a shield world modelled directly after that of Earth, just obviously inside out, and a more polished, refined version of Earth. I, for one, would one day love to see that actually in-game, or at least explored visually, because the idea of a more polished and pure and refined version of Earth, but turned inside out with the same continents, but, you know, cleaner and more foreigner-esque.
In their defense, in the defense of the devs, it's so hard to do everything. So, like, while I seem like I'm complaining about external media, and to a point I am, it makes it hard for newer people, for newer players, for people that want to come into the series, or even old players that want to come back into the series, but maybe didn't know the full scope of the lore. It makes it very hard for them to piece together an entire narrative in the entire universe, right? Now, to the designer's credit, they can only do so much. Like, yes, we could have a mention to a Earth-like shield world like this. We could have, you know, maybe heard that in a best that they could have probably done as a holotape if we got Halo Infinite DLC, but in the book is going to suffice. To spend that much resources specifically on the Slipspace engine, which that was already a development hell in regards to contracted employees just learning the engine and then having to leave and not getting their contracts renewed, like that was a whole event in itself. Like, spending that much resources on something so minor in comparison to the events that were taking place in Infinite on Zeta Halo, right? Or in 3, for example, maybe doing some of the stuff in the background of the series at the time. Or, you know, say we're going into 5 Guardians, right? And maybe they had time constraints. They couldn't do Chief and RB justice. There's only so much they can do in the main games, and even side games as well, like ODST, right? People would love another ODST, but, you know, are we necessarily playing as ODST going to be seeing the Oni spook ship, right? The jail ship where Oni experimented with the flood on prisoners, right? That's, as far as I'm aware, relegated to just a comic or a book. There's limitations to what games can bring out, and I guess then you can make an argument that modders could maybe do it, but that's not technically official.
It would be fascinating. But I digress. Bastion is the librarian's experimental laboratory, and the plants that she is reseeding there are actually derived from the genetic material of the Precursors, the ancient Tier 0 transcendent neural physical species that had created life in the galaxy millions of years beforehand.
From my understanding, the Zalanin, the Endless, are also plant-based as well.
That the Foreigners had risen up against. The Precursors being the very birth of the Flood.
Yeah.
This paved the way, narratively speaking, for the return of the Precursors. But of course, these plant-like forms would then have to evolve over thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions of years to get anywhere close to achieving their original form. The intention being that they would eventually achieve the same technological tier as their ancient ancestors, but would be free of the genetic memory of the transgressions against their race, and thus be free of the corruptions that would ultimately fuel their transition into the Flood, a plague on the galaxy. They would once again be the pure Precursors, the creators and weavers of life, rather than the harbingers of death, the monument of all our sins. This seemed like a very logical laid out plan, However, that doesn't appear to be what we're seeing in more recent narrative explorations. The recently released book Halo Outcasts.
Was Halo Outcast the book that Tanaka and the Arbiter allegedly smashed? I was hearing stuff about that. I couldn't tell if that was actually a meme or not.
Took place majoritively on the planet of Netherop. Both human and Swords of Sanghelios forces had been drawn to the planet due to rumours of an ancient artifact or weapon that was capable of killing Guardians. Given that the created uprising led by the rogue AI Cortana was in full swing at this point, it stood to reason that whatever force controlled this ancient artifact were capable of freeing themselves and their allies from the clutches of created control. This artifact and the technology therein was far more advanced than the Tier 6 civilization that had existed on the planet centuries earlier. Quite separately to this direct conflict, an individual by the name of Rosa Fertez, suffering from a debilitating, virulent, terminal disease called prion disease, came into contact with entities that simply called themselves the Veiled Ones, then the Lost Ones, and now nothing. These entities offered an injured Rosa a choice of whether to exist or not to exist. She opted for the former, and the entities advised her not to tell anyone of their encounter, and then healed her of her otherwise incurable prion disease.
Interesting.
Rosa honoured this pledge and remained entirely quiet about this contact, but knew that she had been in contact with the Precursors, the very species that were thought to have been wiped out during the Forerunner Precursor War, and then ultimately corrupted across the eons and turned into the Flood, which were once again nearly wiped out during the Forerunner Flood War, and then once again came to resurgence in 2552 with the release of the Flood on Installation 04 and the closing events of the Human Covenant War. But of course, these entities were not the Flood. They were not the corrupted versions of themselves.
No, these are precursors.
They were the purer, original versions of the Precursors, bearing in mind that the Precursors are neurophysical in nature and can spontaneously change their form, their profile, their technological sophistication, and their entire imprint on the galaxy at will.
That actually brings about an interesting thought process of, the concept of strike me down and I'll become stronger than you could ever imagine, right? The Precursors could have collectively just become ethereal, so to speak. And, obviously the memory of them will still exist. And that's probably how they can still just go around and do things potentially if this logic tracks, right? So while their physical forms became corrupted inside the vials and pods, right, that the Flood, came from initially, right, during the Forerunner Human War, I guess technically the events before it, right? It's an interesting thing to consider, because what if, maybe I almost said the Endless, maybe if the Precursors just left their physical forms to exist within neural physics itself, with just to be intangible, maybe that's what led to the corruption of the physical forms and the events after that. That'd be interesting to think about.
And now finally we get up to the most recent events, and that is the Flood-infected Spartans that we're seeing in the multiplayer. And this is not to mention the recent intel that's launched alongside Reckoning, where clear evidence of something approximating a Flood infestation accessing Spartan armor, infecting the Spartans themselves, and then overriding the armor systems, taking full executive control of the Gen 3 platform. Now yes, this could just simply be a Flood infestation. It is within the boundaries of capability of the Flood to infest both biological hosts, such as the Spartans themselves, and be able to interface directly with the electronic systems of Mjolnir-powered assault armor, and, since they're not technically AI-based algorithms, perhaps Mjolnir's AI counter-intrusion algorithms wouldn't be effective against them. Again, the logic plague is testament to the Flood's ability to infest electronic systems, as well as the biological.
Well, even in Halo 2 and 3, right? We had how many of you remember the elite, and this is more prominent in 3, I think, right? The elite infected Flood forms, how they still had shields and could recharge their own shields. So it's not a stretch to say that, the Mjolnir platform would be beneficial to the Flood forms if they interface properly.
So, yes, it could just be Flood. However, the final 2 lines that we're given in
Unity and
Intel
sweetness.
Part 1 is Unity, Sweetness. This echoes both the Gravemind and Primordial's musings on life and the consumption of all life being sweetness, but also the parallels drawn directly to the Precursors themselves, who viewed all life and all of its experiences as sweetness for the living universe. And then, when you take all of that into consideration, it draws a very clear picture. The Precursors are returning. And this is where we are with the lore at the moment, and this is now where my opinions step in.
Okay.
And like I said at the start of this video, I'm in 2 minds about it. Yes, okay, it would be cool for the Precursors to come forward, but we've also been told quite clearly, relatively recently, that all narrative associated with the Halo Infinite multiplayer is no longer withstanding. It's no longer a part of Halo.
What?
So surely if this is happening within the multiplayer, it's only happening in the multiplayer as part.
That's what I thought this was anything in multiplayer technically wasn't canon. Which, once again, I'm going to lament that we'll most likely never get Halo Infinite DLC for campaign, as somebody that bought 2 copies, both Xbox and PC. I'm a little sad on that. That's interesting to see the divide between canon and non-canon, which, I mean, some people like non-canon stuff. Like me, I mean, I think Force Unleashed is canon for Star Wars, but I mean, there's both legend and canon fans that will absolutely write entire theses, essays, and dissertations on why that can't be, right? And there's a place for non-canon works, inside canon works. I mean, there's always a place for that. So, I mean, yeah, I wrote it off as just a promotional, hey, guys, remember the Flood? You should play.
Part of this particular season's advertising campaign. It's a small narrative nod towards the multiplayer. But then if that's the case, the 2 aforementioned books that both clearly outline the return of the Precursors wouldn't be in place, would they? So what is it? Is the multiplayer actually once again got a narrative, but they haven't actually disclosed that runs in parallel alongside the books and the larger Halo universe? Or
I would say that it's to draw hype, because this is happening in background lore, for effectively, right? This is happening in background novelizations. So happening in novels, not everyone having access to the novels, which thank you, Installation00, for bringing light to this. This is incredibly entertaining. This is incredibly enlightening as well. This could be adjacent enough for a non-canonical, haha, let's have fun multiplayer season, right? To, kind of tie into those, but in a non-canon way. But you still have the canonical plot of the Precursors going on in the novels in the background for a potential later payoff inside of actual canon gameplay.
is this just kind of a nod in that direction? It's hard to say. My real opinions, however, boil down to a few key points. 1. Halo thrives on mystery.
Yeah.
Some of the deepest, most lore-saturated moments of Halo to date have been when we haven't been given immense amounts of information, when things remain a mystery, but have just enough information that it spawns interest and intrigue and curiosity into the deeper narrative, and theories and ideas and concepts can be thrown around. That's why the lore and narrative that surrounds Mendicant Bias and the Precursor War and the Foreigners, back when it was just the original Halo trilogy, was so appealing and so immersive. Halo thrives on its mystery.
I mean, you see that in series like Tolkien, right? There's still debate to this day who the Nazgul were, right? Before they became the Nazgul. You hear people like me who will mention the door within the Paths of the Dead. That's mentioned in a single line in Tolkien, specifically Return of the King, right? In regards to, there's a door here. This is a door with an odd feel to it, and never is alluded to again. Why was this door interesting? What about it, right? Tom Bombadil, for those of you that have actually read Tolkien, right? And, like, movie watchers, you'd be like, who the hell's Tom Bombadil? Oh, Tom Bombadil's a thing. Yeah, I actually agree with Peter Jackson not putting him in the movies. That would have been a little bit hard for your average viewer. But alas, right? Mystery can fuel a good narrative. Mystery can absolutely propel it forward if done correctly. And Halo did do a lot of that. I think as well, it's not to betray your audience's expectations. If you're going to say the Didact example from 4, right? If you're going to have the Didact, showcase him, quote unquote, dying, right? But then show up in a comic later and he's not dead, right? And he actually ends up getting composed, and he's technically an asset just waiting there now at this point, being composed into that system. Like, it almost feels like a betrayal. Another thing, right? The rookie from ODST, right? A lot of people, where's the rookie now? As far as I'm aware, he's dead, right? So, I mean, that was also betrayal to the audience because they off-screened him. Spartan Locke, right? I mean, as somebody that is in the vast minority of people and actually liked Halo 5 story, right? I had a good time playing it multiple times. Have to go back through again for Voz, but that's beside the point. People didn't necessarily like Locke. In in Infinite, we get to see one of the Spartan Killer brothers. One of them has Locke's helmet on his shoulder. Is Locke dead? Is Locke not dead? I don't know, and I feel that because of how Infinite's campaign was portrayed, as well as the betrayal of, well, we're going to have DLC, but no, we're not going to have DLC and no split screen, right? Maybe the mystery is the best thing to keep intact there. What was it? The AI Alexander, right, on that medical station where June is supposed to be. I think it was in a novel he was stated to be there. And in the campaign, we see Cortana being like, AI Alexander, do you swear loyalty to me? Or she was talking to him. AI Alexander says, yes, Cortana, it was a pleasure serving you. Blows up the station. Is June alive or is June dead at this point? Because as far as in the book, he was comatose, right? I think that mystery, if done well, can absolutely propel Halo as a narrative and narratives in general forward, right? You have the Paths of the Dead in Tolkien. You have something like Harry Potter, right? The nature of Horcruxes, right? We're never going to get an answer to what Horcruxes are. I have my own theories, having read it for, a decade at this point. I haven't read them in a while, right? But, growing up reading with it, I have my own ideas on how a Horcrux is made, but we're never going to actually know. We're not going to get an official stance on that for valid reasons. To Halo, where you have this mystery of, after Halo 3, what happened to the Gravemind? And we really didn't have any confirmation that the Flood were even still around on High Charity until Awakening the Nightmare from Halo Wars 2, which, as far as I'm aware, a lot of people liked Awakening the Nightmare from Halo Wars 2. So there's just a lot of interesting things. And I do agree that, yes, I do agree with Installation 00 in regards to some of the best moments in Halo. The library, right? Watching the cutscene of Johnson and Co. going into where the Flood were stored on in Halo CE, right? Some of these moments are just amazing. And it's making sure that you don't betray your audience's expectations as well.
Many would argue, when Halo 4 was released and we were finally shown the Foreigners, and more of the Foreigner narrative was opened up to us, both in the Foreigner saga of books and in the deep lore of Halo 4 and Halo 5 itself, that we lost something quite special in Halo. We lost the mystery that surrounded the Foreigners.
Yeah.
And with the loss of that mystery, some of its appeal went with it. I will say, however, that Halo 4 did a very good job in balancing the loss of the mystery surrounding the Foreigners and the introduction of the mysteries surrounding ancient humanity, because, proportionally speaking, we still know very little about ancient humanity.
We really do.
So there was something of a balance to be struck in this regard. So it wasn't like we entirely lost mystery, we just supplanted it for a different mystery. My worry is that we're now bringing forward one of the biggest mysteries in Halo, one of the most foundational core bones of the Halo franchise. The entirety of all of the narrative can be traced all the way back to the Precursors, and the very introduction of the Flood in Halo CE, that huge plot twist that turned Halo from a space opera into a horror game and made it so addicting back in the day, all can be traced back to the Precursors. If we are on the precipice of revealing new information regarding the Precursors to the same degree that we were with the Forerunners, and there is nothing else to supplant it. There's nothing else to swap out for it in the same way that the Forerunner mystery disappeared and the Ancient Human mystery came forward. What mystery will be left for Halo?
This is a good point. I will say that this isn't necessarily always a foolproof way to do it. For those that have watched Naruto, how many people were ready for that 6-pass Madara versus Naruto and Sasuke? But then, Zetsu, who technically could be a karma, depending, with the Boruto definitions, right? We could have Black Zetsu being a karma, supplanted Madara and became Kaguya. You, in that case, did take a threat that was now fully known, a fully realized double Rinnegan Madara, and supplanted it with a far more powerful being that, yes, kind of had foreshadowing, but you can't, narratively, you can't always swap out like that. And another point in case, this is going to be in the Star Wars sequel trilogy, right? Where you have Snoke being built up through 2 movies as the big bad, right? Snoke gets absolutely just cut down on screen in a way that I was like, wow, that's actually kind of bold in terms of direction choice. And then, next film, no lead up at the end of that. Next film, external material withstanding, see my argument earlier in this video, right? Where you have suddenly it's Palpatine, and you have a cool moment where it's like, I have been every single voice you have heard inside your head, and all those voices, right? Snoke, Vader, and then Palpatine, right? And it doesn't quite transfer over. Once again, this is actually pretty par for the course for Palpatine. Like, he's done really weird things in Legends where he's absolutely reincarnated himself into clone bodies. He did leave his body on the Death Star to reincarnate into a Sheev Palpatine clone body in Legends. Like, this is just par for the course for him. I think the delivery was once again a little bit of a betrayal of expectations. You should absolutely be able to have plot twists. You should absolutely feel empowered in your stories, in media, to have these kinds of twists and swap outs and reveals. Absolutely. You just have to make sure it's done in a way that feels genuine. It's not a, by the way, you were going to fight Madara, we're going to switch it up now. Now you're fighting Kaguya, right? It's not necessarily feeling like that. And it's more of a, New Hope, Empire Strikes Back into Return of the Jedi, where Palpatine's maybe mentioned in the background. He is the, overarching antagonist. And you finally see him in his frail, quote unquote, old self in Return of the Jedi, but you feel he is not Vader. He is his own entity. He has that aura of power and demands that, presence, right? Now, how we can, do this to Halo is, we could absolutely have bits and pieces revealed of the Precursors. You could even have the cheesy cop-out narratively of, as you, humanity as you are in your evolution will not comprehend what we have. We may give you this, but those that don't know cannot comprehend, cannot understand, right? You could even throw a little cheesy thing like that in there. And I could see that going to great effect while still maintaining the full mystery, or at least most of the mystery of the Precursors. There's nothing saying that they have to reveal everything. The Forerunners, as they currently stand, going from, after Halo 3, were the focus, right? And yeah, so we had to learn about their structure. We had to learn about their caste system. We had to learn about the Ur-Didact, the Isodidact. We had to learn about Cryptums. We had to learn about their shield worlds. That there were Forerunners that did, in fact, survive because shield worlds, right? And a number of these things had to be fleshed out. And even then, against the Flood, right? Star Roads, and how Mendicant Bias and Offensive Bias had their fight. Master Builder Faba, right? In Zeta Halo, which we're currently on, with the Palace of Pain that used to be here. Potentially still is here, remnants of it maybe. And, that had to get fleshed out to flesh out a civilization. You're right, we still don't know a lot about ancient humanity. We still don't know enough about the Zalanin. We still don't know enough about the Precursors. And nothing's saying that they have to give that same treatment that they give the Forerunners to any of those races, depending on their presence in the story. And even then, having an omnipotent, omnipresent, omnipowerful race in the Precursors, being ethereal, if you will, may even be a bonus for the story. But those are kind of my thoughts on
one hand, the Flood returning. Fantastic. That should happen, and it should have happened a while ago. We've known for quite a long time that the Flood survived deep within High Charity on the Ark because the firing of the replacement Installation 04 was done so while it wasn't completed, so it didn't have full effect. So the anti-neural physical nature of it didn't kill the entirety of the Flood within High Charity.
Gravemind could still be alive,
it
absolutely.
stands to reason that High Charity, the Ark, wasn't the only location left in the galaxy that held Flood specimens.
No.
It seems, at least at face value, that almost all
Zeta Halo, where Infinite takes place, currently has, what, 8 proto-Gravemines on it?
Fauna facilities, in one way or another, have Flood containment facilities. So the Flood have never actually gone away. They're still in the galaxy. They're just in stasis, or they're out of reach.
There's a
So
cryptum.
yes, the Flood return.
There's a cryptum in Infinite. I've never found it, but I've seen videos of it. There's a cryptum with a flood spore that you can find in Infinite somewhere. Like, it shows a flood spore on it.
Fantastic. It should happen. It needs to happen. It's a big, big piece of the Halo story. But the reveal of the Precursors, new information coming to light, lifting the veil of mystery that surrounds them, may be detrimental to Halo's long-term narrative.
I can agree with that, actually. I can agree
Because
with
if
that.
we lift the veil on that, what's left? Yes, there's some mystery surrounding mendicant bias. There's still some mystery surrounding offensive bias. However, it's clear, based on the legendary ending of Halo Infinite itself, that they were planning on bringing offensive bias into the fold in some degree.
Yes.
So once all of that is said and done, what's left? I hope that whatever is planned is executed very, very carefully.
Yes.
Because if the veil of mystery is lifted and there's nothing left to wonder about anymore, Halo will lose a part of itself. Halo will lose that deep appeal. It'll lose its core.
Yeah, I can absolutely agree with that.
And I don't think I can stomach that.
No.
Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, consider smashing the like button and leave a comment below on what you'd like me to cover next. Big shout out to my patrons, Spartan10148, the Metarch of my installation, Falcon, Prophet Bear, Mikhail, Sophia, and Ashley, my dutiful monitors, Darian, Scarab, Spartan0137, Anthony, Ghost, Aaron, Chris, Jacob, Sean, Element Zero, Somatic, Jordan J3, Dan, Mr. Keys, Directal, Gunslinger, Jacob, Bandmill, Echo, Evermore, Officer Cat, and Personal Devil, my diligent sub-monitors, my fleet of Strato Sentinels, and my loyal enforcers. And all the other patrons who have jumped aboard to support the channel. It means more to me than I can accurately put into words. Another shout out to my Tier 0 Transcendent YouTube members, Spartan137, Jacob, Schmitty, Talia, Fenrir, and Born Stellar, and all the other YouTube members keeping my installation running on that glorious vacuum energy. Shout out to John for, I don't fucking know. And if you want more of this kind of content, hit the subscribe button and the little bell icon so you don't miss any future videos. And consider jumping aboard yourself as a patron or YouTube member to keep the channel alive and kicking. Thanks again for watching. Take it easy, everyone, and find peace in the domain.
And you know what you should do? If you enjoyed this video, and you'd like the uncut, uninterrupted versions of these videos, and even then, some longer videos, such as, I don't know, the Halo Ring, most detailed breakdown, or the Arc, most detailed breakdown, which for all intents and purposes are a little too long for React content, you should go check out Installation00. You know who else, speaking on, supplementary materials such as books, comics, lore, piecing them together, right? Who do we know that already does all this? Installation00. You should absolutely go and check them out because their channel does a lot of good things. Whenever I look at a Halo channel, specifically lore, I will always go to Installation00 because he continues to put out such amazing work. And that's not just because he said, oh yeah, no, cool, I'm perfectly fine with React content, thank you for asking, right? No, I genuinely think that he is, one, an amazing creator. He's very kind, he's very personable, and he also is highly intelligent and loves Halo. He brings a lot to the table, and I really love his content, and I would really just be devastated if his content just ceased. So if you or anybody you know has interest in Halo, you should definitely go check him out. In regard to Halo losing the mystery, losing that appeal, right? I think if they give the Precursors, the treatment they gave the Forerunners, and they reveal everything, how neural physics works for them, how certain things mechanically work, society work, how to put down, quote unquote, them in the flood, right? I think that it will kill a lot of the magic. And I actually base this off of I believe it's an argument Josh Strife Hayes brought to the table in regards to MMOs, where MMOs stop being fun when you understand everything and kind of pipeline everything. I'm kind of like paraphrasing the pipeline part of that, right? But think of it this way, right? As somebody who has played a number of MMOs, right? So me playing 14 right now, if I went from ARR to Endwalker right now in the next 2 weeks, just blitzed it, do you think that it's going to have as much magic once I know how everything pieces together? Does Lord of the Rings, after you go through it, after hearing about this 10-hour extended edition binge fest with magic and swords and, combat and friendship, do you think that after you watch it, you necessarily have the same feeling you did before? Absolutely, you feel fulfilled, but it doesn't have the same feeling. So learning everything about the Precursors could be detrimental. Learning some things about the Precursors could help a lot. But it's a little bit of a balancing act, and we'll see what 343 and Microsoft have up their sleeve. What are your thoughts on the video? What are your thoughts on the Precursors and the Xalanin and these flowers that were planted in this book? What are your thoughts on Halo being spread across so many different forms of media that it becomes a little hard for new players to keep track of? Would you recommend Installation00 to other people? Because I know I absolutely would. Puts in a lot of great work. Let me know in the comment section. Definitely go check out Installation00, and I will see you in the next